Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue, episode 61. And it is Miami Freedom Park Day, which is the main topic of today that we will be spending 90 minutes on because it was a huge event that Inter Miami made a big deal about and made everyone be hush-hush about it yesterday. And ultimately, this is game-changing for the club in ways that I can't quite figure out. So we'll talk about it for 5 minutes, and then we'll talk about Messi for a while because that feels like a more fun topic. As always, I'm your host, Scotty. I'm here with my co-host, Saur. How are you feeling today, my man?
I hate international breaks, and I can't emphasize that more. I hate it. It stops club football, it stops Inter Miami games, and my weekends look boring. Yeah, here we are talking about Inter Miami. Anyways, can't wait to get into it, man. Let's talk about Lionel Messi, and of course that 5-minute conversation that we're going to have about what the announcement was.
Yes, I agree with you sometimes when it comes to international break because sometimes you complain, but Inter Miami still plays, and so it's your favorite team in Europe that has the week off, but you still get some Inter Miami, so it's okay. This international break, there is no club soccer, including MLS. So I'm with you, man. The USMNT plays on Saturday. I don't know if you're watching the Dutch team. I don't know when they play, but it is kind of a quiet time. Not a lot going on in Inter Miami's world. We've been talking about this in almost every episode. There's very little going on behind the scenes. And so normally when we would spend the first 10, 15 minutes just catching up on what's going on with the club, it has felt very barren in terms of news and happenings and stuff. So let's start and talk about Miami Freedom Park for a few minutes, but then we'll transition to our main topic for the episode, which is, of course, reintegrating the best player in the world. And I think personally, that's the most fun conversation we could have at this time. We have been teasing it for the last 4 or 5 times we've gone live with everyone. And so to finally have this conversation and feel the freedom to flesh out our thoughts, I'm very much looking forward to, and I want to hear your thoughts on the flip side. Miami Freedom Park. Yesterday, Inter Miami posted on Twitter a logo that didn't have the herons in it, which was weird. They made it sound like there was a big announcement. They told some of the supporters, or rather season ticket holders and supporters groups what was happening, but they asked them to be hush-hush. And so there was lots of activity about there's something coming tomorrow, but no one can say what it was. People were speculating that they were going to announce something with a women's team, something about a new jersey, a new logo. And it turns out it is about the stadium, which is going to go into service at the beginning of the 2026 season. And if you are so inclined to get tickets, that is something that you can start working towards. Now, we already knew that it was going to start in 2026, or that was already the sort of general common knowledge of the matter. But if you're a season ticket holder and you now have an opportunity to, get really involved and it can all become very real for you, I guess I get why that's exciting. But for those of us that aren't season ticket holders, it's sort of, much ado about nothing. And I am very excited for the stadium. And, me and you might have to go record at the stadium for that first game because that would be awesome. But not much new in terms of things we didn't already know.
Yeah, man, if all goes well, we'll be continuing this podcast for the next couple of years. And when we move to the new stadium, I don't mind taking a field trip there and doing a podcast live from the ground. That'll be a fantastic opportunity. But that's still a ways away. And this announcement was a bit of a bust because I remember you texting me and I thought, oh, well, the way they're making it sound like it seems like aliens have landed or something. Nothing too fancy as such, which is fine. We're in that part of the season where the focus is primarily on the football. You can't do much in terms of changing the team. So there's not administrative announcements happening as such on the sidelines. And good for the season ticket holders. Good opportunity for them to go and choose their seats and pick out the new view that they're going to have from that stadium. But unfortunately for the rest of us, it's just a little bit of a longer wait.
Yeah, there were some new renderings of what the stadium's supposed to look like. I'll be honest, they don't look tremendously different than the previous set of renderings. So, again, for those of us that our season ticket holders that don't go to every single game. It is cool. It's exciting. It's good to know that they feel like they can, say for sure 2026 it will be ready. But again, it doesn't change anything for today, this year, or our fandom for the next little while. So do you feel like we touched on that appropriately?
Yeah, I think the last thing that I'd want to say on that is the Miami Freedom Park dialogue doesn't necessarily roll off the tongue. So I think we're going to stick to the Drive Pink dialogue for now. That's for sure.
Yeah, the MFP dialogue.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into it. Main topic of the day, Lionel Messi. He has been back in training for about a week now. He has not gone to international duty, which was very kind, and both of Lionel Messi and Scaloni for not working hard to get him there instead of at Inter Miami, where he hasn't played in over 3 months. That's really cool. He was thought to be a question mark for Saturday night's game up until they left for the trip on Friday, and they decided, you know what, we're not going to bring him. So there was no Messi on Saturday night, which meant we were definitely going to get him for his return next Saturday night against the Philadelphia Union at Chase Stadium. And you got it in my head now. And he's back, man. And we've got 7 games left, and then we got the playoffs, and we've got trophies to acquire. And we now have the best player on our team, the best player in the league, and some would say the best player on the planet to this day. How are you feeling about having Messi back?
It's been so long. It's been 84 years. I feel like that meme. No, honestly, it's been a while since we've seen him. 3 months is a bare long time. The good thing is it doesn't feel that way because this team has been performing really well in Messi's absence. But I think we're truly going to understand the depth of his absence once he's back in the team. And it's truly going to hit how much he actually brings to the team once he's back in that starting 11 and doing what Messi does best. As of now, I think these 3 months, Tata Martino has done a fantastic job in keeping the team together, getting the best out of the players, and getting results and staying on top. Our biggest fear was Inter Miami losing ground to some of their competitors. And I think we spoke about this when we were discussing Messi being away for the Copa America, that our best chance would be, yes, we might lose a couple of games, but we want to still stay with the pack and make sure we're up amongst the leaders. Lo and behold, we're out there by ourselves, practically guaranteed, or with one hand on the supporter shield and looking very pretty on top. With Messi, it's just going to get even better, isn't it?
We'll see. And I think that's this conversation is, of course, you get a talent upgrade when you bring Lionel Messi back, but can you orient a system that works for this team and not just Lionel Messi? You mentioned that it's been a long time since we've seen Lionel Messi, but I want to add some time to it since we've seen Messi be excellent, be prime Messi, because the last 3 games that we did see him were against St. Louis City, which was a 3-3 draw, and he was good in that game, but we were frustrated because we gave up 3 goals. The game before that, we lost 3-1 against Atlanta. And again, Messi was fine, but we wanted to win that game and we lost, so we were mad. And then the game before that, it was the DC United game in which Campana got the winner in extra stoppage time. We won that game 1-0. A very frustrating game from Messi. So you have to go all the way back to May 11th, which was almost 4 months ago. In a week, so by the time he actually plays against Philly, it'll have been 4 months since we got, that completely dominating Messi. And in the 5 games leading up to that, Inter Miami scored 3, 4, 6, 3, and 3 in those 5 games, which is, as Gel says, being a cheat code, right? That was the prime Messi. And he had some amazing moments too. Against Sporting Kansas City, there was, I think, his best goal of the year where he shot it over the goalkeeper from like 25 yards out, even though the goalkeeper wasn't really off his line. That probably was my favorite goal of his this year. But it's really been a long time since we've seen like Messi go, right? And Inter Miami go with Messi. And so I wanted to talk about how do we reintegrate him. And what can we take away from the last 4 months without Messi to make this team better when he does come back? So give me one thing before we even bring back Messi. What's the biggest thing that this team has learned or grown from over the last 4 months without Messi? Because we've won a lot of games. We've had a much better defense. We've found ways to score goals in a variety of ways. We haven't been particularly one-dimensional. We haven't relied on one player. So what did we learn during the last 4 months?
That this team is deep, the roster is deep, and these players can grind out a result when they need to. We can perform without Messi. The biggest question mark about this Inter Miami team was, what's their identity without Messi? And I think what this last 4 months have done is establish our identity without Lionel Messi. So now if we don't have him in the starting 11, there aren't going to be questions about how good this team is, because this team has shown that they're good enough to stay on top and beat some of the best teams in the league. So yeah, grinding out results, getting the best out of the players on the pitch, and making the most of the deep roster that we have is, I think, the biggest takeaways that I have from this last 4-month period. Although there's something to say about us not being able to perform when it truly, truly matters and when the trophy is on the line. So it feels like we're there at the 99%. But when it needs to be that 100% or that 105%, we're just not able to make it over that mark. And with Messi coming back, I do expect us to eventually cross that 100%, 105% mark and just have that special X factor that we've been missing. Because let's be honest, the results have come in, the points have come in, the performances have been good, but it hasn't necessarily been flashy. It hasn't been super comfortable. There have been instances where we've had our back against the walls and have really had to work for the result. And ever since Messi's gone, there hasn't been that game where we just absolutely slap the opponent to bits and just get a result by dominating a game truly and effectively. And we haven't done that. And I'm hoping that once he's back, that's something that we'll be able to get back in our identity as a team.
Yeah. And you remember some of the most fun games in terms of goal scoring, right? The New York Red Bulls game, Messi went off, 5 assists and a goal. The
Orlando game.
Orlando City game, right? Well, Suarez was incredible in that first half,
Yeah.
but Messi had a couple goals and a couple assists. And so if Inter Miami offensively is going to be the juggernaut that we believe we can be, it obviously needs Messi back. I'm going to give you some numbers. 14 goals and 11 assists so far this season for Lionel Messi in only 1,265 minutes. That is 1.78 goal contributions per game per 90. That's 7 goal contributions for every 4 games. So this is almost 2 goals a game you're adding when you put Lionel Messi on the pitch. But at what cost going the other way? And this is the thing that I think Inter Miami grew in the most with the most capacity, was learning that we don't have to outscore opponents. We can play solid defense. And I think the biggest lessons were having an upgraded center back and not just upgrade in terms of personnel, but also chemistry. And then also having a midfield that was able to track runners so you weren't crushed in transition, because that was the biggest problem earlier on in the season. And even the last 2 times we saw Messi against Atlanta, was against Atlanta and against St. Louis. We were getting crushed in transition. And Inter Miami has really solved those problems. And I think it's personnel related. We have had Yannick Bright go into the mid. He's emerged as a starter for this team. We've had Federico Redondo come back. As you may remember, he got injured after like 3 or 4 games. Diego Gomez also spent a long time injured. I think moving Gressel out of the midfield was really helpful. Moving Busquets, or at least partnering Busquets with more athletic players around him, I thought was really helpful. And so,
hey, moving Busquets to defense, man, he's our best center back.
Well, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But to me, the best thing that Inter Miami did over the last 4 months, aside from just accumulating points, was learning that if we have a midfield that doesn't give up tremendous amounts or tremendous opportunities in transition, because they are athletic defensively and have sort of the intelligence to know where to be at and when to be there, and I'm speaking of Yannick Bright for that part, you can really be a much better defensive team. Even if you aren't controlling possession, even if you aren't particularly wonderful at set pieces, even if you aren't suffocating opponents by being on their side of the field, you can still be a solid defensive team. And I don't think any of the things I just mentioned in terms of Inter Miami's improvement come at the cost of having a right winger like Lionel Messi.
Not at all. And first of all, I think you make an excellent point about the takeaway from the last 4 months, which is Inter Miami's defensive capabilities improving a lot more. And that's what I meant by grinding results out as well. But more so, I think the defense setup has become a lot better. We spoke about this during the CONCACAF run, during the Leagues Cup run, that in tournaments we want Inter Miami to be defensively stable, to have a good defensive base so that we can build off of that. And often at times, at least at the start of the season for the first 4 months up until May, that was missing in large chunks. And now we've discovered that side of the game. And it almost feels like there are two separate Inter Miami teams who we've seen this season. One that's offensively phenomenal, can outscore any opponent, but leaks goals in abundance and has absolutely no legs in defensive transition. And then the other side of the coin is a team that is so defensively solid, stable, has its setup correct, and is able to build from that defensive foundation and stop some of the best attacking teams in the league. And I completely agree with you that the best form for this Inter Miami team is joining the two together. But I think the second part is more important than the first part. And that's something that we can't really sacrifice. And we need to build off of that defensive foundation. And adding someone like Lionel Messi doesn't necessarily take away that foundation at all. So I completely agree with you on that point.
I've been watching the Premier League since it came back over the last couple of weeks, and I was reminded of something that I've sort of not applied to this Inter Miami team, but that is this idea of creating overloads high up or in dangerous situations so that you can create goals. And this is Tata's philosophy of soccer: is get players higher up the pitch and find ways to create overloads so that you can create good goal scoring opportunities. And of real late over the last month or so, not including this past weekend, we've done that by pressing high and then winning the ball high and having numbers already in good spots up the field and then sitting back once we got a lead. A little bit before that, but after Messi left, there was a long period where we were winning, we were sitting deep and then hitting the opposite team in transition and creating numbers by being sound behind the ball and then getting a few numbers up where you are sucking the opposition team in and then finding numbers the other way. But when we had Messi early in the season, it was 10 guys on the opposite side of the field and just consistently circling the ball around until you found these little paths, these little channels and little bits of space where Messi, Suarez, Gressel, Robert Taylor, Jordi Alba could operate effectively and then create that final moment of class and glory and get goals. The problem with that style was we would get hit in transition too easily. And so how do you continue to have players high up the pitch, but still protect yourself in case you turn the ball over? Because aside from Busquets and Messi and Suarez, everyone else is not world-class in terms of their technical ability. And I even include Jordi Alba in that. Not that he's not world-class in terms of his technical ability, but he does turn the ball over sometimes. And he does have games where he loses the ball a little too frequently and it turns into defensive transitions. So how can we get a lot of numbers high at the pitch, maintain possession, but then still stay sound if we have to defend in transition? That, to me, is the biggest question. And if we can answer that tonight, we can give Tata Martino the keys to winning the MLS Cup. So that's the biggest question to me. Inter Miami has proven they've gotten a lot better in defensive transitions, but now can they apply what they've learned to this high up the field style that Tata Martino is going to want to play when Lionel Messi comes back onto the field? That's the biggest question.
All right, Tata, listen to me. I've got an answer for you, yeah? You put Darwin Martinez in goal, Drake Callender up top. No, I'm kidding. Honestly, that's a really interesting question, and one that I don't know if we'll be able to answer today, but 100% a good conversation to have and try to understand how we get the best of both worlds, essentially. And the reason that we struggled so much in defensive transition was because we had our midfield and our forward players high up the pitch, as you mentioned, but then our defensive line would be left sitting back because they didn't trust their pace to be able to keep up with any of the defensive transitions that happen. What that does is leave a absolute chasm in the middle where there's a massive gap between the midfield and the defense. And because of that, it gives the opposition attackers a lot of room to run and play around with the ball. And we didn't necessarily have the best 1v1 defenders either. So someone like Christoph and Aviles would often get isolated completely on defensive transitions and then get beat. And they'd either have to commit a foul or just the player would blow past them. So there was a lot of isolation. There was a lot of islands on the pitch defensively. And that gap between the midfield and the defense was the death of this Inter Miami team. And I think the biggest counter to that is to allow your defensive line to be forward as well, so that at least when your team is pushing up, they push together high up. And when you're caught on the break, it's either an offside or you're able to stop an immediate transition by having more bodies around. Now, you can either have defensive players who are very quick, so that in case there's a or there's a opposition running at you, you're able to keep up with them, which Inter Miami doesn't necessarily have in terms of player style. Or you have a defensive midfielder whose sole duty is to sweep up anything that flows out against you in defensive transitions. And we found that with Yannick Bright. And having him in this team, staying slightly higher up, keeping up with any turnovers that happen, closing and clogging up some of those passing lanes for the opposition, is at least one way to try and stop those defensive transitions. And I think we've solved part of that problem by having someone like Yannick Bright or a dedicated number 6 in the middle, but then also by having someone like David Martinez, who's slightly faster, but also seems to be a good defender of space and can keep up with players. Because I remember a couple of times this season we've seen matches where David Martinez had to run to get to his defender, and he was able to keep up with or get to his attacker, and was able to keep up with them quite well. So having those two in the defensive line and pushing them up, which I think they're comfortable doing, is actually going to stop that gap building up in the between the midfield and the defense. And at least that's one step towards stopping those defensive transitions from failing.
Sorry, you said Aviles and Martinez?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
I mean, Aviles, Aviles and Martinez.
Okay. I think that's exactly right. I think when you paired Aviles earlier in the season with Christoph or even Nico Frede or Ryan Saylor, if that combination happened, you didn't have enough team speed. I don't know, too many. You didn't have enough team speed, and we've even seen Tata Martino acknowledge that when he's felt like he had to put Noah Allen in a game at center back just because he needed some more quickness. I think with David Martinez now and Aviles, you feel like you have two center backs that can be good in defensive transitions because they have the pace and they have the one-on-one capacity to defend. And then I think the biggest part on top of that is having Yannick Bright in front of them to protect. We spent a long time earlier this season, or even over the last couple of weeks, we've talked about Cello a lot and how Cello's been pushing higher up the pitch, and we preferred him lower, playing deeper and playing more conservatively because we felt like it provided a defensive stability for our team because we had that third body back there. And I don't think that you need to do that anymore. And I think Tata recognizes that you don't need to do that anymore if you have Yannick Bright in the midfield, because it's not just the athleticism, it's the positioning, it's the awareness, it's the understanding of the game that he has in spades, really. And so to me, if you have two center backs in David Martinez and Toto Aviles and you have Yannick Bright in front of them protecting them, you are a significantly better team in defensive transition than you were at any point before this in the season. And so to me, Messi comes back And those three are the first three I put on the team sheet because I feel like if you have that triangle and your two center backs and your DM, you now have a defensive foundation that is going to be significantly better than anything you had before. And that still frees up a significant number of players to get forward and to get into attack and to combine and to create and to score goals. So to me, in my head, I'm building this out. That triangle is where it starts. And I think you nailed it with the center backs. And I think adding Yannick Bright as extra protection just makes it that much better.
There's also another point, I think, why we've improved in some of the defensive transitions and we don't get caught on the counters as much as we used to. And that's because our pressing structure has actually improved. A lot of the players around us...
They're not going to press anymore.
Yeah.
They're not going to press with Messi and Suarez.
I agree with you, and I don't think that's going to be the case. But even then, I think players like Redondo and Gomez have got a better sense of where their positioning needs to be relative to their players. So relative to where Yannick Bright is, relative to where Diego Gomez is, they tend to play a lot better together as a team now, which is going to inevitably help them once Messi comes back on the pitch. But yeah, I think I agree with you. Those three are going to be essential. Whether you put Sergio Busquets in there as a centre back, I think that needs to be an option for sure.
Yeah, he's the next guy.
Yeah, but
and I also think trying him in the regular season is important. We talked about this last pod, but we have to build towards being like perfect once the playoffs come around. And so seeing if you can just go Martinez, Busquets, Yannick Bright in front of them as the triangle, I think that would be really important to test out, because if it does work, you have a monster in possession at both center back spots and guys that can spray it around, and you can still maintain, the defensive solidity. But we have to see that first.
Very true.
Okay, so are we in agreement there with the center backs and the DM?
That's the way to go, man. We need that. We need that trifecta to be able to be defensively sound.
Okay, so let's fast forward to next Saturday. We get the lineup, and it won't be obvious because he's suspended, but it's Martinez, Busquets, Yannick Bright in front of them. How much better do you feel about our defense if it's that, as opposed to Busquets at the 6, Martinez, and Ian Frey?
Does it mean that we're losing out on Yannick Bright altogether?
Yeah.
No, I'll be a little bit disappointed because...
No, but how much better do you feel about the game?
Oh.
How much more confidence?
With Ian Frey in the lineup instead of Yannick Bright?
Yannick Bright. Well, either way.
Yeah. I won't feel as confident once Yannick Bright's out of the game. I'll just put it that way.
Right, because he is so good at stopping stopping transitions. And so if you have him in the midfield, you are going to be so much better defensively. Now, how do we round out the midfield so that it is complete? Obviously, Sergio Busquets is going to be on the field. And if Aviles is suspended, that could be as a center back. But it could also be, once Aviles comes back in the midfield, it's going to be either instead of Yannick Bright or it's going to be next to Yannick Bright.
Can we sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
For the purpose of this exercise, can we just assume that Aviles is an option? Because otherwise we won't be able to get our best formation. Yeah. So, okay. We've got David Martinez, completely agreed. Aviles as our second center back, and then Yannick Bright. That's the three that we're picking. Mm-hmm. So inevitably, the fourth choice in the team sheet is Sergio Busquets. Has to be, right?
Sure. Yeah, he's the next midfielder for sure.
Yeah. So who do you put next to him then?
Okay, so you have Yannick Bright for your defensive solidity, but he's not going to give you a ton going forward. He's not going to give you goal scoring output. He's not going to create goals for you, obviously. But that allows you to have Busquets roaming up and down the pitch so he can play a little bit higher, or he can come back and distribute from the back. And so you are giving him the freedom to find the game as he feels necessary, because he has a 6 next to him or behind him or whatever to do the defensive dirty work. So I think him in that, deep line playmaker that can get forward and combine and create with Messi is actually ideal. And obviously we've seen the two of them combine and create a number of times since their arrival last summer. So I love that. And then for me, the last midfield spot has to go to someone who's hyper athletic, that is going to do the work both ways. And I don't think Tata's going to agree with me on this, but I think it's Diego Gomez.
Don't say it. Yeah, knew it. Knew you were going to go with Gomez. And I agree with you on that. I agree with you on that point. But, sorry, there's another point that we haven't taken into consideration. What formation is Tata Martino going to play? Because I feel like he's almost gone with saying that I'm going to play the 3-5-2 because it's now starting to work.
He hasn't played the 3-5-2 in the last 5 months.
No, sorry, the back three. What was the formation that he was playing? 3-3-2.
He's been playing a 2 midfield formation.
Yeah, a 2 midfield formation. Do you think he's going to play that, or does he just revert to a 4-3-3?
I would like to see a 4-3-3. And I'll tell you why in a few minutes. And as we'll get forward to the wingers, we'll get forward to the attack in a few minutes, but I want to round out the midfield and have that conversation. Because if you have a midfield that has the defensive solidity of Yannick Bright, that box-to-box monster that Diego Gomez is, and I know we haven't seen him in the midfield in quite some time, but remember, he's the best box-to-box in the league. He is a monster. He destroys what opposition midfields want to do with the ball. And we haven't seen that because he's been in the front line, but he is destructive to an opposition midfield. And as we see, he can make those runs out of the midfield into scoring opportunities, and he can get forward and create and, put the ball where it needs to be to create goal scoring opportunities. So you partner him with Busquets a little bit higher up the pitch, and you have a banger of a combination that is really, really nice. I think it gives you a fully well-rounded midfield. Are we in agreement with that? And then if it's not Diego Gomez, it can be either Redondo or Cremascu, who's just sort of a lesser version of what Gomez gives you right now.
I hate the fact that we've gone back to this conversation because it's an imperative conversation to have, very important. But again, it goes on to my point that I've constantly made throughout the season. A midfield is not about putting your best player on the pitch. It's about putting players who work together the best way. And it's about the combination and the chemistry. And the midfield that you just named with the three, Yannick Bright, Sergio Busquets, and Gomez, provides you 3 completely different profiles. And I think that's going to be so solid that it allows you to do multiple things in the game. You change Gomez with Redondo, and I feel like the stability and the chemistry just sort of gets skewed up a little bit. And I don't necessarily know if you get that same level of athleticism that Gomez brings.
It's not even the athleticism. It's just that Gomez is, again, people are forgetting because we haven't seen it in so long because he's been playing high up and then he had the injury. But go back and watch the early season games. Gomez in the midfield makes it so hard for other teams to have real good, solid midfield play. Like, he is an absolute wrecking ball to the opposition's midfield and what they want to and are trying to do. And so if you can have that wrecking ball stopping plays before they happen, stopping the buildup before they happen, creating turnovers in the midfield, and then immediately kicking it forward, then having Busquets who can roam and find the game as you want, and then having all of that protected just in case with Yannick Bright, I think it's perfect, man. And again, there's a reason people talk about the midfield and how important it is. So that to me is
okay, this is me just speculating a little bit, but I do think even if, regardless of the formation, you get Sergio Busquets sitting between the 2 center backs instead of playing more centrally, I think Bright and Gomez together as a double pivot could work in the midfield. I'm not sure if it allows you the same level of passing range as someone like Redondo being in there does, but I still feel good about that midfield.
Busquets' job. And that's Busquets' job. Plus, you have David Martinez from the back line distributing.
Yeah, and then it allows you to play that 3-4-3 just as effectively, or at least on paper, it looks good.
And so when you take Gomez out, which we'll talk about in a minute, and you put in a Cremascu or a Redondo, they are good, and Redondo's been a lot better lately. Cremascu, they run, they're athletic, they hustle, they can do the defensive dirty work, they can get forward and provide something going forward. Like, they have all of that. It's just that Gomez is just a wrecking ball. And so
he's Brighton's next superstar, man. He has to be in there.
Okay, so do we agree with the midfield and the center backs, at least on paper?
Yes, we're in complete agreement, but I doubt Tata's going to agree to us. So.
Okay, let's talk about the fullbacks
Mhm.
because obviously Jordi Alba wants to get high. And as we've seen, Chelo Wigan has been pushing higher up the field, and that's obviously directed by Tata Martino. And so for me, if you have that defensive base up the spine, the two center backs that are athletic, the six that can crush transitions, and the wrecking ball as an 8 in Diego Gomez, you are so much healthier defensively than we have ever been this season. And so that gives you the freedom for your fullbacks to just play way high up the pitch. And so give me Jordi Alba playing way high up the pitch with David Martinez, slinging the ball towards him up the field. And then, give me Ian Frey, of course, because he's much more dynamic up the field. But even if it's Chelo Wigan, those two can then play way high up the pitch. They can combine with Messi. They can combine with Robert Taylor. They can sink into the midfield if they feel like they have to. It is so much more dynamic. And of course, as I mentioned at the start of this conversation, if you want to create these overloads of players and bodies high up the field to create good goal scoring opportunities, having your fullbacks be a big part of that is super, super helpful. And so give me the defensive health up the spine, and then I'm happy to let the fullbacks run way high up the pitch. And if you can get it going from both sides, I think that's even better. Of course, that would require Ian Frey, not Chelo Wigan. But for now, I already love what we're doing.
Yeah, and Alba's locked in, right? Regardless of what formation you play, regardless of what team you play, Alba's a lock-in. So the question is more so about who's going to play that right back role or that right wing back role. And I don't think there's anybody better to do that than Ian Frey in this team. Yes, Chelo Wigan is Tata's favorite. He is good, solid defensively. He has had good games in positions that require him to defend a little bit. But I feel like he's not been great going forward by any means. And when he first came onto the team, I thought his biggest asset would be going up and try and contribute up the field. But he hasn't been able to do that. And it would have been perfectly fine if we didn't have a backup option like Ian Frey, who's actually phenomenal going forward and with the ball at his feet. Now, we're assuming that we're playing a 4-3-3 formation, right?
Yeah.
So in that formation, I still think Ian Frey fits in perfectly because he has the defensive mindset to lock down a defense when needed. Mm-hmm. Yes, he may not be as stable as Chelo Wigan, and that's a debate that we can have separately as well. But let's assume he's not as stable as Chelo Wigan, but what he offers going forward and what Tata Martino likes to do with his fullbacks, it's frustrating, yes, but it's also a little bit surprising considering Ian Frey is, I think, Tata Martino's perfect right wing back. So I think having those two in the right back, left back spot is absolutely spot on.
Yeah. So give me Jordi Alba at left back, give me Ian Frey at right back, and Chelo Wigan can be his, when he needs to rest for health. But that's the back 7 plus Drake Calendar and goal. That's the back 8 I want as my starting 11. And that brings us to the front. We are no longer going to press because we're not going to press effectively with Messi and Suarez. Maybe we can press in the midfield a little bit. Like we can press sort of in the middle of the pitch, but we're not going to press high at the pitch like we've seen recently. Obviously, Messi is going to go on the field as a right winger, Suarez as striker. And the reason why I want it to be a front 3 is because I remember early in the season when we were playing a front 2 with just Messi and Suarez, and they both love to play centrally. And we did not do enough to create width high up the field and to spread the back line of the defense out. And that isn't really done with your fullbacks surprising people by bombing up the field, because Jordi Alba can get the ball high up the pitch down that left flank. But if there's too many bodies centrally, you can defend the pass instead of defending the passer, right? And so it would clog up the middle of the pitch. And even Messi and Suarez sometimes would pull off great things because they're amazing, but even they would struggle because there would just be too many bodies. And that became the game plan basically from the Nashville game last year in the Leagues Cup final, or especially in that MLS regular season game where they drew us, all the way until, that's what DC United did when they had the 1-0 loss, right? Play very tight, very narrow, and just don't let Messi and Suarez beat you centrally. The way to stop that or to beat it is to have, in my opinion, that third player high up the pitch down that opposite flank that can draw the defense out and create a little bit more space high up the field for Messi and Suarez centrally. And that is Robert
Can I
Taylor.
say?
Sorry. A little too slow. My bad. That's Robert Taylor. And that's why he was so good early this season. That's why he was so good last season, is because he either created space to let Messi and the striker operate more freely, or he was given space because they were playing too centrally, and then he had time and space on the ball to do great things. And so while I appreciate Diego Gomez, and I think he's done an incredible job as a left winger, I never saw that coming. If you told me at the beginning of the season he was going to be that, I would call you crazy, because I saw last year how inefficient and imprecise he was, but he's been amazing this year. But to me, he's not a true winger. He's a guy that beats guys over the top. He's got a great shot. He can set players up, but he's a transition winger, and he's a guy that has the athleticism skill, but he's not going to take guys on one-on-one. He's not going to beat them going either direction. He's not going to beat them to the left and then put in a good cross. He's not going to beat them to the right and fire a good shot. That's Robert Taylor, and that's the type of winger you need to draw that outside back, or if it's a back three, that right center back out there to create more space centrally. So for me, those are the front three that give you the ideal attack. And then they are supported with Jordi Alba and the right back getting high up the field, Diego Gomez running out of the midfield, and Sergio Busquets, when he feels necessary or appropriate, can get up and help with combination play. And I love that. Please just give me that, and I'll be happy. I'll be so happy if we got that.
Again, Messi undroppable, Suarez undroppable. The question mark remains about what to do on that left wing spot. It's ironic that the out-and-out winger that we have in this team, the only one, is actually Robert Taylor. And I'm going to make a prediction here that might be completely wrong, but I think once Messi comes back, we see the best of Robert Taylor. Because Robert Taylor gets spaces, gets in behind defenses, and can stretch the game out a lot more for other players around him to thrive. And he may not have the best game, but as long as he's stuck to that sideline, making those runs on the sideline and in behind the defense, it allows the passing lanes in between in the center of the pitch to open up. And that's where Suarez and Messi and Busquets thrive the best. So for me, I think Robert Taylor has to be on the pitch. I absolutely love him. I think he's one of my favorite Inter Miami players, barring any of the Barcelona boys. And yes, he hasn't been in best form, but I do think we're going to get the best out of Robert Taylor once Messi's back on the pitch. And you want to have two separate dimensions of players on both wings, right? I wouldn't mind having two Messis on the left side and the right side. That's obviously, you would never say no to that. But when you have a player like Messi who loves to come in, as you mentioned, centrally, let's say if we put someone like Rojas, and I'm not saying Rojas can't do that. We've seen him take on players. We've seen him use that byline to try and stretch the defense out a little bit and run in behind the defense. But I don't think he does it as effectively as Robert Taylor. And I do think there's a case to be made about Rojas' best position being slightly more centrally rather than out wide. Again, this is a little bit of a conundrum because Rojas' best position hasn't been determined. There's been games where he's played really well on the wings. There's been games where he's played really well centrally. But I would 100% prefer Robert Taylor in there in that left wing spot. And it allows us, again, two very different dimensions and very different looks on each side of the pitch. And then Alba and Robert Taylor combined so well, man. I think it's going to be a wild, wild ride if we can get Robert Taylor back to his best.
Yeah, there is a sense out there, and I've heard this on other shows and on Twitter and stuff, that Robert Taylor and Jordi Alba don't play well together, and that the results don't bear that out. I know that sometimes it looks like it because Jordi Alba gets frustrated with Robert Taylor, but the actual game results and the actual goal scoring numbers do not bear that out. And so I do want to say that. I don't know what else to say, man. That's the best 11. In my head, it makes perfect sense. It is well balanced. It is defensively better than anything we've seen. And it gives you numbers high up the field that Tata Martino wants. And it gives you good, high-quality players that have good chemistry and that play together and that are good at scoring goals. And that's what I want to
And
see, man.
I think we need to put an asterisk on this team as well, because we need to preface this conversation by saying, according to us, this is the best combination of players on the pitch at the same time that can get the best out of a team. Now, we went with the assumption that this is a 4-3-3 formation. I think if you switch to a 3-4-3, this works just as well. Busquets, I think this works just as well. Perhaps maybe changing the middle a little bit, but let's assume that Tata Martino wants to play a 3-4-3, right? I still think you can fit the personnel in there.
No, I agree.
Now we're leaving out Matas Rojas. We're leaving out Federico Redondo. We're leaving out Benjamin Kramaski. That's a lot of fire.
Gressel.
Julian Gressel, who I didn't even
Leo
remember.
Campana.
Leo Campana. Well, Leo Campana is a bench player anyway, so that's fine. But we're leaving our 4 starter level players. And again, I don't doubt that Tata Martino is not going to drop Redondo, potentially not even going to drop Gressel. And this might just be wishful thinking to say this is the starting 11 that we think is the best 11. We may not even get to see this ever on a pitch at the same time. That's how crazy it sounds.
Don't say that.
But there's a case to be made that this is potentially the most balanced starting 11 that we have. Again, lots of debate about where Redondo fits in, where Kramaski fits in, where Gressel fits in. And we can potentially have that conversation as well. But this is the 11 that I would want to see, for sure.
Guys, if you're in the chat right now, we are going to get to your comments in a minute. We have one more thing we want to talk about, but then we're going to go through all of them and kind of hear your counter arguments. I know that you've been, as we've been saying things, you've been giving your counterpoints, but tell us why you think this wouldn't work, why you think this isn't ideal. Tell us where you think someone needs to go, and then we'll address it in a few minutes, because we talk all the time about Inter Miami, and so we clearly have some bit of a mind meld in terms of who we like, how we like them, etc. So we want to hear from you guys, and and
give us your best formation. Yeah.
Okay. The last thing I wanted to talk about before we do get to the chat is the things you're most excited about when Messi comes back, because I have a number of things that I'm really excited about, and it starts with just the fact that he's a freak, man. We forget, but if you go back and watch his highlights, if you go back and watch those games, and every time he's been out for an injury or whatever, and then he comes back and he's a freak again, and I'm just like, I forgot how good he was. And this time I'm not going to forget, even though I've already forgotten, I'm sure I've forgotten. I'm consciously thinking to myself, it's going to be so much better than I think it's going to be, because he's Lionel Messi. He's awesome.
Messi is not the same player that he was a year ago. Messi is not the same player that he was 2 years ago. Messi is just, obviously, he's aging, he's growing old, losing some of the skills that he had when he was 18. But Messi is still 10 times the player than every other player on the pitch. What he brings to this team is, I don't think we can express it in words, and I don't think we should express it in words. And once he's on the pitch, the reactions are going to speak for themselves. I'm almost glad that we have the next 7 games to try and fit Messi back into the team. Because if we didn't have that gap of 7 games to try and tinker around to see how best all of this fits together, because let's be honest, there are quite a few question marks about how we can get the best out of this team. I wouldn't have wanted to see Messi go straight into a playoff game, right? So I'm excited to see what Messi does when he gets on the pitch, because he's phenomenal altogether. But I'm also excited to see him play next to Yannick Bright, play next to Ian Frey, get back his combinations with Alba, with Suarez. There's so much that we missed out with him being away for 3 months. Some of our players have reached peak form at the right time with Messi being out. Now imagine getting the best out of all our players and having the best version of Messi on the pitch at the same time. That's so exciting, man. There's so much potential for this team to just reach a whole different level that we haven't seen yet. And I really hope we're able to see this happen, because sometimes expectations fall short, and I don't think that's going to be the case with this Inter Miami team, and I hope I'm right.
I have to see Ian Frey play as a right back with Lionel Messi on the pitch, because I mentioned earlier that what opposition defenses do against Messi is they play really tight, really narrow, and really deep. And you need a left winger to try and spread them out to the left. But if you can get Ian Frey with all that space on the right side that he has never gotten, he's never been on the pitch at the same time as Messi. He's going to have so much space and be wide open. And he has, I think, the tools and the X factor to.
He's just going to waltz through that defense in the space that's left behind.
Yes. I have to see that. And if Tata, and I'm nervous because Tata hasn't really played him as a right back, but I have to see that. And if Tata doesn't do that, I'm going to be so frustrated. And then lastly, October 2nd against Columbus at Lower.com Field. Give me the 11 that we talked about, and I will be a happy, happy man, and I will feel like we will win that game, and convincingly. And honestly, I want to see it so much that I'm just afraid that Tata is going to break my heart. And I know he's probably going to, but if he doesn't, it will be beautiful. And I'm so confident about that.
And he hasn't even played with David Martinez, man. Like, our defense has gone through so many iterations to get to what it is right now. And Messi has been absent for all of that. It's truly been forever since we've seen Lionel Messi on the pitch. So many exciting things to look forward to. That Columbus game is going to be, it's going to be spicy if we have everyone fit, no red cards. And if Tata Martino picks the right team, we're going to throw an absolute party in our pregame show, because we know how giddy we get when we watch that lineup come out and we've got our favorite players on the pitch. Again, though, this team has a lot of potential. This team has a lot of players who are begging for first team time. Let's be honest. We could make 2 proper teams out of this Inter Miami roster. So it'll be interesting to see how Tata Martino fits into it. I would urge you guys to go send Tata the link for this podcast so that he can listen to us and get an idea of what we want him to do. Because let's be honest, every time we've told him to do something, it's always worked out. And Yannick Bright is obviously not in the team because of how amazing of a player he is. He's in the team because we spoke so highly about him. No, in all seriousness, I just hope Tata doesn't ruin it for all of us.
Okay, let's get to the chat. And for those listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we do all of our shows live on YouTube. And so if that's something you ever want to participate in, you want to get into the chat and we can interact with each other, that is always fun. And I encourage you to do that, but you have to do it live on YouTube. So first one, Daniel says, what concerns me is Messi's fitness and drive to play his best when he returns. He was rather average with Argentina and Miami in his most recent performances with both teams. You want to take that one first?
Yeah, and that's why I mentioned the stretch of 7 games. As long as Lionel Messi can stay fit, he has those 7 games, which, let's be honest, isn't the worst run ever. It's quite a decent run. Inter Miami should expect to win a lot of those games. It's just going to give us a little bit of time to adjust to having Messi back in the team. It gives Messi the time to get back to his best form, play a little bit, get his feet under him, and just get back to his best before playoffs come. Even if Lionel Messi is not in form, that's still better than every other player on the pitch. So I'm not too worried about him losing form. He's going to step it up exactly at the right time. I have absolutely no doubts. And again, those 7 games is going to be really important to embed him back into the team.
I actually think it's important to play him consistently.
Yeah.
I've noticed that his worst performances tend to come after he got a game off. He had an injury for a while, and then he played in the Rapids in the Monterrey game, and he was like, okay, right? But then he came and he was just firing against Sporting Kansas City, Nashville, New England, the Red Bulls, Montreal. And then we gave him the game off at Orlando City, and he wasn't as good against DC United that following weekend. We gave him the game off against Vancouver. He wasn't as good in the following game against Atlanta. And so I do think it's important to get him in the 11 and just get him playing and get him part of the team. What I will say is I also think it's really healthy and important for Messi that he has something to play for. We want to win the points record. We want to win the supporter shield. We want to get home field advantage. We want to get the CONCACAF Champions Cup spot for next year. Like every single game, or at least the next 5 games they're going to be something to play for. And so I think that just adds a little extra motivation, especially for the best players, knowing like it's trophy time. It's trophy time. Let's go win some
And it's
trophies.
history time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not worried about it. And ultimately, I think it's Messi, man. He'll be fine. And also, we didn't rush him back. And I think that was important. He's healthy, and he's going to get another couple weeks before he actually has to play. And so there's no like lingering. There's no, can he play 30 minutes but not 60 minutes? You know what I mean? He's just healthy and ready to go.
He starts against Philadelphia, you think?
I think so, yeah. I think he might. Yeah. Well, let me check the schedule. Maybe not actually, because we play a midweek game. So I think he starts against Atlanta. I mean, against Philadelphia, and he comes off the bench against Atlanta. That's my expectation. Tata can finally make the 3-5-2 work. I feel like I talked about this. Gel says that, but you just don't have enough width up front if you play with two up top. And so I don't think that's what we're going to do. And I think if we do that, it's going to not work particularly well.
Hasn't worked thus far, so I don't expect it to work now.
A says, I think Messi needs Busquets in the midfield. And we did touch on this, but we talked about putting Busquets back in the midfield. And I think we both feel very comfortable and good about him playing as a center back. We've seen it enough. He's improved as a center back. He's really good as a center back. But when it comes to getting the ball to Lionel Messi, no one's better than Sergio Busquets. And I also think one of the things that we didn't love about the midfield when Busquets was in it was that lack of transition defense and the lack of athleticism. And so if you put Matías Rojas and Julian Gressel and Sergio Busquets together in a midfield, I'm not going to like it. And I'm going to wish we had Busquets on the back line and Yannick Brighton. But if you pair him with Yannick Bright and Diego Gomez, or more likely Redondo or Kramaski, I think you have plenty of athleticism, plenty of defense in order to protect Busquets so that he can get up the pitch and do that combination work with Messi and just force feed Messi the ball in open spaces and work with him to, create good opportunities.
Yeah, and I think one thing we didn't mention was sometimes when we didn't have Sergio Busquets in the middle, I'm not even sure if that was the case when Messi was playing, we sometimes struggle to connect the midfield to the front line. And I think Messi does need that channel in between to be able to get that ball at the right time. Otherwise, we see Messi coming back into the midfield, and then that we lose that cutting edge in the final third. So for this to work properly, we need someone of Sergio Busquets' caliber who can do the passing, who can spread the ball in the midfield. And maybe it'll take a little bit of time if we play him in the back line for everything to adjust, but I think it's going to be best to have Busquets in the midfield. I agree with A here.
Skrilla says, I don't think the 4-3-3 formation is the way to go because Tata will put Busi back in the midfield and Bright on the bench. You have talked about this, and you mentioned it on our last podcast, but one of the reasons he's going with this 3-4-3 formation is to accommodate Yannick Bright in the midfield, and that puts Busquets on the back line. I've responded to that saying, in reality, he's accommodating Federico Redondo in the midfield because Bright is more important to the midfield than Redondo. And that is sort of how this conversation has played out, where it's Redondo is a good player, and I think he's been better of late, but he's not in the best 11. He doesn't fit in a perfect midfield. And I know we have another comment about Redondo, but like that's just the answer, man. You put Busquets and Bright together.
Bright is undroppable at this point in time. And listen, there are very few players who can make themselves undroppable in such a small period of time. But he's shown exactly what he brings to the team, and the gaps that we were facing in the early part of the season. There's a reason we performed so well over the course of 4 months without Messi in the team, and we didn't struggle anymore on those defensive transitions because of what essentially Bright did in that midfield. And his ability to cut off the passing lanes for the opposition and those interceptions that he makes. And he's now started to show strength in the ball. He started to show his passing range as well. He's become a lot more confident and comfortable in receiving the ball in tight spots, getting out of tight areas. It just feels like the ball, every time he goes in with the ball, it just seems like he comes back with it. Like it's always stuck to his feet whenever he goes in for a tackle or whenever he goes in for a challenge. And you can't replace that with any other player on the pitch. If Redondo was able to do that, I would 100% agree that yes, Bright should be dropped in favor of Redondo. But they're two very different players, and their skills don't match. And I would say we can replace Redondo's skills in the midfield with other players. We can't replace Bright's skills in the midfield with anybody else on the pitch. So there
And
you
not
go.
only that, but Bright's skills are more important. Like they
Yeah,
just are. And so
exactly.
Redondo is a nice to have. Yannick Bright is a must have. And when you put it like that, and you have, like you said, 15 starter quality players. 15 starters, another 5 quality players, starter quality players. You have these kind of problems. I just hope the players around Messi don't defer to him too much, or in other words, become too passive, Wookie says. I don't remember that being a problem consistently, but there were moments where it felt like that was an issue. But I do wonder if this team has grown. You know, we've had a lot of young players on the pitch. Diego Gomez, Kramaski, David Ruiz, Noah Allen, Ian Frey, Redondo, Aviles, where they may feel nervous or feel forced or pressured to get the ball to Messi and just let him do the work. But I do feel like a lot of them have grown up over the last 6 months and are hopefully a lot more confident in themselves. I do expect to see a 10, 15-minute period where it feels like we're force-feeding Messi a little too much. But I think overall they're going to figure this out relatively well.
What are your odds on Messi scoring within the first 5 minutes he's on the pitch?
I think he's either going to score in the first, maybe not 5, but in the first 15 minutes, or he's going to have like a hat trick or a goal contribution hat trick. So
I think it's going to be both.
Yeah, maybe. It could be. Is it Tata plays that way, or do teams tend to play a low block when Messi is on the pitch, says A. And then Wookie says, I recall that we struggle with low blocks. You want to take that, or do you want me to go?
I think I can start with this because let's be honest, when the best way to defend against Messi is to be compact, right? Teams learned that very quickly, as Scotty mentioned during the Nashville game that last season. That became the blueprint of how to frustrate this Inter Miami team, because you cut off some of the passing lanes, you cut off opportunities for Messi to combine those cute little 1-2s that he does in the middle, and that takes away a lot of the threat that Messi has, because then he needs players around him to be able to play through those tight spaces, and he's not able to do everything by himself when he's surrounded by an overload of compact bodies in the middle of the park. And essentially, a lot of the times what we've seen happen is someone like Alba making a run in behind the defenders and Messi popping the ball off to him on the sidelines, and that creating a goal opportunity. So for me, I think teams learn very quickly at the start of the season that the best way to play against this Inter Miami team is to sit back and hurt them onto counter, not just because of Messi being there, but also because Inter Miami did not know how to defend against counterattacks. So that was an obvious weakness that we had. So teams learned that quickly, they adapted, and they used that as a problem. I don't think we face the same issues as long as we are able to stretch the field out. We might struggle a little bit to create at the start, but I think we have enough quality to break down any defenses. The biggest issue we faced was it wasn't just the low block, it was the counter attack that followed the low block. Because if we lost the ball,
okay, but let's stick to the low block, because I feel like we spent a lot of time talking about defending transition.
Yeah, so I think ultimately we have enough quality on this pitch to break the low blocks, and we have players who we need to now stretch the defense out to be able to create those passing channels as we spoke about earlier. So we are going to face low blocks 100% because of Messi being on the pitch, but I think we need to adapt to that and just get better at it.
Here are the two keys in my head from what we've talked about in this episode to breaking down low blocks is A, have Robert Taylor on the pitch. And we're going to get to this conversation again, I see, about Diego Gomez versus Robert Taylor, but Robert Taylor spreads out the defense in a way that Diego Gomez just doesn't, because he can be effective and dangerous at the corner of the 18-yard box in a way that Diego Gomez just doesn't. And they are both really high-quality players, and you could even convince me that Diego Gomez is a better winger right now, but they're different styles, and I think Robert Taylor's style is most effective and efficient against a defense that's trying to stop Messi. And then the other thing is getting Busquets higher at the pitch, because We saw against the New England Revolution in that 4-1 game on the road. If you get him up the field, if you get him sort of entering the final third centrally, he is clinical with those final passes into Messi, into Suarez, into Jordi Alba in order to create openings that can turn into goal scoring opportunities. So we're going to talk about playing Busquets on the back line again, and we're going to talk. And this is the reason why you want him higher up the pitch, is because he can be another world-class technical player that has incredible vision and incredible passing capacity in order to break down a low block. And so when you get there, that's why you want Busquets higher up the pitch. And putting Yannick Bright in the midfield allows you to do that. And if you put Busquets in the back line, he can't do that. So to me, that's the solution. Skrilla says Aviles is not suspended next game. I checked and only mentioned for the Chicago game. I will say he got his 12th. Well, he got his 11th yellow card and his 12th yellow card. So unless he got one taken away at some point because of good behavior and he went on a streak without a yellow card, then he should be suspended, one for the red card and then a second for yellow card accumulation. But he may have had like a good behavior thing or something. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know about playing Alba and Cello up the field with a back four. We saw what happened when the other teams play a low block and counterattack against us. But again, this is the same conversation. You throw Yannick Bright in the midfield and you throw two more athletic center backs back there, and you feel so much better about defending transition. So to me, that's the solution. At least try it and see, because then if it works, you can have your fullbacks playing way high up the pitch.
I'm nodding my head because I don't have anything more to add to that. We've discussed enough about the low block.
Robert Taylor's throwing the opening pitch tonight at the Marlins game. That's kind of cool. I still think Gomez is better in the wing. The Paraguay team put him on the wing at the Olympics, and he was a beast. Yeah, that's true. But Diego Gomez is the best player on the Paraguay team, and so they need him to create offense and score goals for them. Inter Miami doesn't need that from him because they have Messi and Suarez. If you put him in the midfield, that's where you're maximizing his ability. And I also think, you control the midfield. Like that midfield three is going to dominate games. And then you control possession. You control the entire game if you can control the midfield like that three can, in my head. And then also I think Robert Taylor stylistically just is a better fit opposite Messi. And also I'm not ruling out that Rojas could also do that. And I wouldn't mind seeing Rojas as a left winger because we haven't really got an opportunity to see that. But to me, I think stylistically, taking guys on one-on-one, forcing that outside fullback or that outside center back to come play you and give you opportunities one-on-one and free up space centrally, it's just so important. And Diego Gomez, that's not the type of winger he is. And so, even if he's a better winger, he's just not the right style, I think.
Yeah, and I think Diego Gomez as a left winger works better when there's more space for him to run into and when the game is a lot more
that's
open.
Also part of it.
Yes, Robert Taylor can do that as well, but I think Diego Gomez does that better than Robert Taylor. So when the game is open, I'd rather have Robert Taylor in there than I'd rather have Diego Gomez in there. But when it's slightly more compact and we need someone to stretch the field out, the one game that comes to mind is the DC United game, the first one, where we struggled at the start because DC actually playing through the middle, had their bodies in there, stopped us from playing, at least at the start in the first half. It wasn't as open. And we used Gresso and Robert Taylor on the wings and sprayed the ball out to them to try and create those opportunities. And that's where I think Robert Taylor fits in better than Gomez. But again, man, Gomez is a phenomenal player. Overall, I think he's a better player than Robert Taylor, but it's just a matter of how it fits stylistically rather than anything else.
Yeah, and again, Messi's the best player. So you have to build this team around Messi. And it's not just about putting the best player out there, it's about putting the best fits out there. And that's why Redondo, who might be better than some of the players on the field, might not make the starting lineup. Same with Julian Gressel, same with Rojas, right? You want it to fit stylistically so that you can dominate games, create plenty of opportunities for your world-class finishers, and also not give up opportunities going the other way. So to me, that's what it is. Thomas says that he agrees with Saur. The 3-4-3 is the best formation because of Alba, and Tata loves that formation since Atlanta. Again, my only counterpoint is if you have Busquets on the back line, You can't have him going high up the pitch in order to help break down a low block. And so that's it. That's the difference to me. If you don't want him to do that, then it doesn't actually even play that differently. You just have your two central midfielders securing the midfield, and Busquets can just distribute from the back line. So,
and exactly, I think we live in an age of football where you can adjust formations midway in the game. I think the 3-4-3 and the 4-3-3 formation, in terms of the personnel that need to be on the pitch, is not that different. You just adapt to the situations that you're playing in. If you need Busquets to fall into the back line, I think we'll be fine in the 3-4-3. If you need Busquets to push up into the midfield, I think we'll be fine in the 4-3-3. Overall, I like the starting 11 that we've picked because I think we can use it in multiple ways, whether it's the 4-3-3 or the 3-4-3. And build up can be different. Every team builds up in a different formation than the one they've posted in their pre-game team sheet. So I agree that 4-3-3 would be my preferred one, but I don't see how the 3-4-3 wouldn't work on this with this starting 11. It should be fine.
Philippe says, I think specific games we should switch and rotate the wingers personally. I think Taylor would be amazing in the NYC game, but in the Charlotte game, Gomez would be the man in the left. That's totally fine. I think what we're designing is building towards what we're going to play against Columbus and what we're going to do in the quarterfinals and the semifinals against the Columbuses and the Cincinnatis and the LAFCs in the final. Like in those specific games, what is our best 11? To me, that's what I'm thinking of.
And I like how you use the word what we will do rather than what we would do, which is good confidence. I like it.
And then Philippe says, Frey and Messi would be insane. Man, I have to see this. I have to see it. If Tata doesn't give this to me,
please, Tata,
I'll be a Tata, honestly. Or every game, that's fine. Skrill says, the reason I prefer the 3-4-3 is because we don't need to be worried about Alba up front, and I trust the defense against the counterattack with Bright in the midfield. That's fair, and I think we just talked about it, but it's just
and
where you...
The counter-attack is not going to be an issue with the 4-3-3 either because of having Bright in the midfield. I just don't think that's going to be the issue in the 4-3-3, as long as Bright is on the pitch.
Ash says, Messi forces half the opposing team to stay back. Actually, that's not what happens when the other team is not specifically playing in a low block. I'll tell you what happens. The front line plays up high up the pitch because they're trying to do what frontline players do. The midfield is trying to play high up the pitch because they're trying to do what midfield players do. But the back line does not come with them. They stay way back because they're afraid of Messi. And so you get these huge gaps between the midfield and the back line.
Orlando game.
Yeah. Like almost every game that Messi plays that's not against a low block. There's just this gulf of space between the midfield and the back line, and Messi is a monster at operating in them, and that's that area. So, yeah, that's why Messi is so effective, and he can just crush teams' souls because they give them that much space because the back line is just afraid of him. Sean, we talked about the stadium at the beginning. We didn't have much to say on it, but if you wanted to, we talked about it for like 5 minutes. When has something not working stopped Tata before? You can take this one.
Tata Martino is going to do what Tata Martino wants to do. Nothing can change that ever. And I don't doubt it that the first lineup that Tata Martino puts on the team sheet against Philadelphia does not have Yannick Bright or David Martinez or Ian Frey in it. He's probably going to revert back to the playing 11 that we had in the first game. He's probably going to bring back Yedlin from Cincinnati as well. It's just going to be awful. The reason we're having this podcast is to make sure everyone's on the same page about what we think the best starting 11 is. And anything that happens hereafter is going to be us venting about how Tata Martino's not listened to us. It's going to be a wild ride, guys. You better strap in because it's not going to be exactly what we think. He's probably going to end up playing like a 5-6 or something. It's weird formations.
Cynical says Messi will run circles around any defense. The only time he has problems is when the rest of the team's not doing well. We are firing on all cylinders. The final run is going to be historic. 100%.
I can feel it in my bones, man.
So there is a lot of people talking, and Thomas and Skriller were talking about how he's not going to bench Redondo. And I think that's probably true, but also he should. not that he should, but that he needs to in the most important games.
You know what? Who's going to be the sufferer for this? It's going to be Gressel because I don't think he has an obvious
I
place
agree.
in this team.
I
It's
agree.
going to be Robert Taylor because I think he's going to try and fit Gomez in this team no matter what. And I think it's going to be
Oh,
Rojas.
Redondo.
I think Redondo is going to be in there in the midfield. Bright has to be in there. If Tata doesn't start Bright, I don't
He
know
will.
what game
He
he's
will.
been watching.
You know,
I
he
have
will.
no idea what team he's been watching this entire season because I don't think it has anything to do with our bias for Yannick Bright, but it's just what he brings to this team, and I don't want to harp on about it again. So for me, yes, Redondo will be there, but it's going to be at the expense of the other three players that I just mentioned, which is Rojas, Grasso, and Taylor.
There's a couple ones about Gomez versus Robert Taylor. Sean says Gomez's natural position is as a central midfielder. Taylor's natural position is on the wings, and that is true. And guys, I'm telling you, I don't know if you forgot or you don't remember, but Gomez in the midfield is an absolute monster, absolute wrecking ball. And I'll be sad if we don't even get to see him in the midfield again. I'll be sad because he would destroy opposition midfields. It was so fun to watch. And I'm certainly looking forward to seeing it again. And then, yeah, Lamar says Taylor needs to start. Thomas says Taylor's not consistent. But I will say Robert Taylor and Diego Gomez have virtually the same number of goal contributions this year in virtually the same amount of minutes. I think there's like 40 minutes in terms of minutes played difference. And it's 11 goal contributions to 10. So like people are a little down on Robert Taylor right now when they shouldn't be. And I'll also add that Robert Taylor is best when he has Messi on the other side. So Ash says they're going to force feed Suarez so he gets the golden boot. I still think Messi's going to finish with the golden boot. I still think Messi's going to win the golden boot.
It's going to be so interesting, man.
Okay. And then last one, Mark, how do you feel about the 4-2-3-1 double pivot with Bright and Busquets and then Gomez and then Messi as the 10 with Gomez and either Gressel or Rojas as the sort of outside midfielder or winger. And then turning into a 4-4-2 defensively. Yeah,
I don't mind it. I don't mind it.
And it's honestly not that different than what we've been talking about. It's just having Messi start centrally and then Gomez play out wide.
I might actually, in some universe, even prefer that. I don't know. I don't think about it.
I wouldn't prefer it, but I think it could. I think it would definitely work. And
yeah.
So to me, that makes a lot of sense. And then that's it. Anything else? Sorry, I just came to those so suddenly.
That was very dead finishing to the comments.
I apologize.
I will say one thing though. This conversation has been fascinating because we are so spoiled as a team, as a fandom. I don't care who plays on that pitch, whether it's Redondo, whether it's Cello Wiegand, whether it's Matías Rojas, Gressel. I'm going to support this team no matter what. Yes, we're going to vent out our frustrations in the pre-game show about why Tata Martino didn't listen to us. But guys, this team has enough quality and there should be no excuses for us not finishing top of the Supporter Shield standing and not winning the MLS Cup. So the fact we have so many options, we're absolutely blessed. And let's hope that this next run of 7 games and then the playoff run is, as Cynical mentioned in the chat, absolutely historic because we are in for a wild ride.
And I think one of the other reasons we wanted to have this is I've put on the record, that's my 11 that I think works best for this team in the most important and biggest games of the season. And so if we lose because Tata is differentiating or deviating from that for reasons that are clearly not on the pitch chemistry reasons, right? He's starting Redondo because he feels like he has to play a player that's worth $8.5 million. He's starting Julian Gressel because he feels like he has loyalty for convincing him to come here, right? Or Cello Wiegand or whatever, right? Like if we lose for one of those reasons, and not just lose against Philadelphia, but lose in the playoffs and get eliminated, I'm gonna be so upset, man. I'm gonna be so upset. And so we've given you the blueprint. This is what he should do, in my opinion. And hopefully we get to see it and see how well it works, because it would be a shame if we didn't. Anything else before we wrap it up, Saur?
Exciting times, man. Looking forward to having Messi back on the pitch and let this Inter Miami team cook, because we are absolute chefs on that football pitch. Let's go Herons.
All right, guys, we will see you next time. No game this weekend, so no pregame, no postgame. We will be back next week, probably Wednesday or Thursday, for another midweek episode, and then we'll get ready for that Philadelphia Union game with the pregame, postgame, instant reaction, all of that good stuff. But until then, I hope you guys have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend. We'll see you guys next time. Have a lovely day.